Halloween is a very scary time. It's when we look at our fears and even become them. Wow. Good morning there. Hello. Little theatrical of an introduction this morning. Halloween really is an interesting time. It's when we say, these things that we're normally scared of, that we normally don't want to face, we kind of look at them, and sometimes we even become the things that we fear as a way to overcome them. So, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the show. I'm Jessica Disborough, licensed social worker and registered psychotherapist in the state of Colorado. I'm also the founder and primary therapist of Higher Consciousness Healing. We offer innovative mental health services to youth and adults through community building, online education, and individual and group therapy. We also have specialized services for the millennial age group. If you want to know more information about our practice and all the fun things that we're doing, definitely check us out on the web at www.higherconsciousnesshealing.org. Right now you're watching our live video blog that we air every Saturday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, where we talk about different mental health issues from a spiritual and scientific perspective. So welcome! Today we're talking about our fears. Our episode is called Shining the Light on Our Fears. And what does that look like? I mean, why discuss our fears in the first place? You know, a lot of us feel like our fear is really legitimate, that we have reasons to be afraid, and that, you know, we need that for our everyday survival. Well, it is key to our evolution, fear. However, not in the ways that we might think. Now, I'm going to break it down because I think discussing what fear is vital to this conversation. Fear, as far as I can tell, and all of my research and study and experience, fear is the absence of love. It's really that simple. You may have heard about the two polarities, fear and love, and how those are really the foundation of everything in the universe. And it's like, well, how is that possible? Well, I like to think about fear and love as being the pulse of the universe, the vibration. And they've even shown this on a scientific level, that the smallest thing that's going on here, you know, besides atoms and molecules and all of that, is a vibration. It's on, off, on, off, on, off. On is love, it's light. Off, it's fear, it's darkness. On, off. The entire universe based on those two dualities. Now, how is that possible? The whole universe made up of those two things, both, you know, at the scientific level and, you know, the energetic level is really what that ends up meaning. Well, when you think about computer programs, all computer programs actually break down to binary code, zeros and ones. So on, off, on, off, on, off. So it's pretty fascinating that when you really break it down, fear is really just the absence of love, of light. And fear is a really natural part of our world and our evolution and what we're doing here. You know, it has helped us survive in the physical way that we know evolution to be. with the limbic system, that reptilian evolved part of the brain, really being the center of the fear response and those stress responses. Now we've come to know, and I'm sure as you're watching this show, you probably agree with me here, we're spiritual beings or energy beings having a physical experience. And so when we talk about that physical part of our being, we're talking about that fear-driven part that's tried to survive over and over and over again for a long time. But we know now that we have a higher level of consciousness and that people are really becoming more informed about themselves and their life and the world, we can really see that we have nothing to fear because there is no death. And death is really the greatest illusion of all, because what seems to be happening is that we're dying in the physical, but we're energy beings and there's all these things that we can't see with our eyes. And so it makes it actually very possible and very reasonable to now put those two theories together. But when we turn on the light, we see that we have nothing to fear. Absolutely nothing to fear. And that really what we're going through is a spiritual evolution too, where we're learning to overcome these fears and these limitations and these illusions and finding what's really real. And what's really real is love. There is really no darkness. Darkness is just the absence of light. So there really is nothing to fear. There really is no fear. There's just love. And that's kind of a really hard concept to wrap our heads around. I know for me personally, I didn't understand that at all. It's like, how can everything be love though? Because we have all of this fear and all these negativities and all of this crazy trauma and bad things. And I started to recognize that this is just kind of what we're doing here as beings, learning about these dualities. Fear teaches us our greatest lessons, and so we really have to look at them and really acknowledge them, because that's part of our journey here. So fear is really normal. It's so normal. It's a basic learned response. Most of us have grown up being afraid. I know I definitely did. We justify our fear based on our past experiences. This person hurt me. I know of this person who was hurt this way. And we're all just, kind of ruminating in a lot of fears right now, especially across the country and across the globe. We're very, very scared. And we've really repressed a lot of these fears, and we don't deal with them, and we don't really recognize how scared we are and how stress is just a normal part of our life, when really it really shouldn't be. Yeah, it really doesn't have to be. Those fear responses were evolved at a time when we didn't have other parts of our brain developed, and we didn't have common sense to know what danger was. If my amygdala and hippocampus and things were shut down and I no longer had a fear response, and I saw a car that was speeding at me and I'm walking down the road, I know that if that car hits me, it's going to injure me and that's going to be painful, and that's not good. So I move away from the car. I don't need a fear response to tell me that. So there's people arguing out there that we don't need fear at all. Very interesting. Well, what does fear look like in our everyday life? And how can we start to recognize it for what it is? Fear is at the root of all dysfunction. All dysfunction. So the big ones, negative thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. They all ultimately stem from some kind of fear or negative past experience that had to do with fear. Anxiety and worry also really great examples of fear. Fear of the future, fear of others getting hurt in some way. It's like we fear what we can't control. And so then control also becomes a very normal manifestation of fear. Manipulation. You see it a lot in workplaces. Micromanaging is a result of fear. If the boss fears that you won't be able to do your side of things and they need to manage you now. Not good. Being untrusting of others, experiences, and life in general. Now we're talking about real fear of others. You're starting to get paranoid and not trusting that things are going to be good. That all stems from fear. And what ends up happening is then people isolate themselves because now they've had bad experiences with the world or people. And I'm not saying that there aren't negative people out there that, are causing harm. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, right? And we all have to kind of make room for that. But isolating ourselves and it's one of the worst things we can do, really, because we're really tribal and we really need that connection with others. And what happens when we isolate is that's what leads to addiction. Addictions start because of a lack of connection, a lack of feeling like they belong. And so we go to something else to connect with instead. And that's usually like substances, food, shopping, lots of things. And then another one that's really a good example of a manifestation of fear is the inability to let go. And, we resist a lot. And a really good example of that is hoarding. We physically don't want to let these things go. And it's really more of a mental inability to let go as well. So if you're dealing with a lot of fear, don't worry. It's totally normal. Totally normal. And it just means that you have that much more room for love. So keep your eye on the prize. So how do we address our fears? What do we do? Well, we have to acknowledge them. That's the most important thing. And use common sense around our fears. Take a look at them. Write them out. Say what fears are irrational and what fears are rational. Because there are some things that we should be afraid of, but it's good to protect ourselves in daily life and have good boundaries for ourselves and recognize when people are dangerous. So we have to use some common sense. A really great example of a rational versus irrational fear. I was traveling alone for the first time in Central America about 2 years ago. And I had so many fears about this trip. I don't speak Spanish, really. I was going by myself. I didn't know a lot about the country. And, I was really throwing myself into the wind here. And so I wrote down all of my fears. And I said, okay, fears, being robbed, all those other bad things that could happen to you. And I was like, okay, so what is reasonable? What's reasonable and what's not reasonable? So reasonable fears, well, being robbed and raped and things like that, that's not, let's try and avoid that. So how can I avoid those things? It's like, well, maybe don't go out at night, maybe make sure you're with someone, make sure that when you're going around that you're looking and paying attention to the people and things around you and so on. Well, that was pretty good, but there was other irrational fears, like I was really scared. I can't really think of a really irrational one that I had, but I was really scared that things were going to be bad. And that was irrational on its own because ultimately life in the universe is loving and kind and wants to do and give you and all of everybody really nice things. So that's how it kind of becomes irrational, there are some things we need to take precautions, but for the most part, we should, and I feel like be able to go out into the world with a sense of hope and love and peace. So we got to let go of the irrational fears, right? We're probably not going to be killed. We're probably not going to be robbed even. Like, I don't even remember the last time someone stole from me. How long ago has that happened? It's been a long time. So there's all these things that we can do, but we got to let go of that irrational fear and thinking that like people are out to get us and that people have bad intentions and all of that. And I'm going to tell you maybe a secret to you, but the crime rate across the US, and I'm hearing probably across the globe, has gone down steadily over the last couple decades. We're actually living in the safest time in human history, the safest time. And we're so afraid. It's all up here. We know all the ways that we could die. We hear all these horror stories. There's all this stuff on the media, TV, violence everywhere. And we're like, oh my God, there's all these terrible things happening all the time. We can't let our children out. Don't let them outside. They need to be watched at all times. And meanwhile, like 30 years ago, people used to let their kids play outside all the time. The neighbors would watch them. Everybody took care of everybody. And now we have this extremely paranoid, fear-driven society where we don't trust our neighbors and we don't want to interact with them because they might be crazy and they could be the next, mass shooter. It's not fun. So we got to let all that go because it's not real. It's not real, people. Safest time in human history. It's not real. And we gotta let go and let the universe and God take care of us. And they've got our back. Like, really, really. All right. Next episode, unconditional love is what I'm going to be talking about. Now that we've really examined fear, we're going to take a look at love. If you have any questions about today's show or any comments that you'd like repeated live, now is the time. And especially if anything I said rubbed you the wrong way, definitely bring it up. Let's talk. And I really want to know how this is jiving with other people and what your responses are. So, a quick announcement while I give a minute for those comments and questions to roll in if there are any today. Is next week, Thursday, we have our spiritual support group for Millennials on November 9th from 7 to about 8:30 here in Lakewood. We're really excited to have our second event. Our group is all about peer support, community building, and education. We're really examining the things that get in the way of our inner peace and serenity. And our topic this month is called The Art of Surrendering to Transitions and Changes. Now, there's a lot going on for people, and if you're in the general age group of like 18 to 30, give or take, definitely check out our group. You can sign up with us on Meetup. I'm going to leave the link in the description box. And I hope you can join us. Right now I'm welcoming everybody and I'm trying to get things up and running. So right now the event is free. So please come if it resonates with you, and especially if you're watching the show and you're really digging me and the vibe and message I'm bringing. We have a whole team of people who are on the same page. So let's all get together and build that community. I know that so many people have told me that this is exactly what they've been looking for, and if you feel like that too, definitely check us out. All right, I don't see any questions or comments, so I'm gonna guess that was pretty self-explanatory. It's just so easy to be afraid. Like, we're just wired for it. So when you start to feel anxious or that fear coming up, take a deep breath and breathe it out. All right. So much more to come. Thank you for watching. If you like the show, please like, share with your friends and family on Facebook, on YouTube. We really love spreading the word about these important topics and connecting the dot between our mental health, spirituality, and all that science. All right, take care, everybody.